The Department of Justice is reviewing classified documents that were found in President Biden's private office from when he was vice president. This is according to the New York Times. President Biden's lawyers discovered a small number of classified documents in his former office at a Washington think tank last fall.
Attorney General Merrick Garland has tapped a Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney, John Lausch, to investigate the discovery. And for obvious reasons, there have been a lot of comparisons made between what's going on with Joe Biden in these documents.
Has the deep state now set its sights on Joe Biden?
Well, do you think this is fair? Obviously, there's a bit of a I told you so vibe coming out of certain quarters of the right wing. People that are Democrats are pushing back, saying this is a very different case, that, you know, there were months, over a year actually, between when there were first requests for Donald Trump to return his documents and the fact that he was not complying is what ultimately resulted in the raid, that the volume of documents was much larger. I think there are 10 documents at issue in the Biden case versus 13,000 total, 103 classified and 18 top secret documents that Donald Trump had. And also there were all of these stories that had been reported about Donald Trump destroying documents, and that's where the sense of urgency perhaps came from, none of which so far has been the case in the Biden scenario. So what do you think about these two?
I mean, to be honest, they seem like pretty different situations based on the fact that, like, Biden's people found these documents and then said, we have them, how can we return them to you? Where in the other case, they're like, hey, can you give us back those documents? And the Trump people said, no, fight me. So it's a very different story. Like, I'm sure there are some people on the right who are like, aha, Biden did. Well, if Trump can be arrested and imprisoned for this, why aren't they going to come from Biden? It just seems very, very different because, again, he's giving them back, which is what they wanted Trump to do.
For sure.
Honestly, what it will probably show is that Trump could have avoided a lot of legal headaches for himself by just giving back the documents, which, again, as I said at the time, it does. Then people on the other side went over their skis a little bit with this, saying, the nuclear secrets were just anyone could have walked through Mar-a-Lago and gotten our most valuable secrets.
It's a love letter to North Korea and all, know. They did.
In all reality, they're probably not very important documents. It's probably fine that he has them, but also he was supposed to give them back, and he can't. You're right that he can just declassify documents, but he has to actually do the process of declassifying. Right. He can't just
wave your hand.
That said, no one has presented evidence to me that it's like such a big deal that there should be charges or any kind of national security implications in the Trump case.
Yeah.
So.
I will say this: the joyous overreach from the MSNBC crowd about what might be in the Trump documents. I mean, segment after segment of just pure speculation about what possibly this could be in there that would damn Trump once and for all, with big, cheesy Cheshire cat grins on everybody's faces. That basically starts to open the door to people making more of the Joe Biden situation than it was. And I think that sometimes Democrats have to really realize not to overextend their arguments, because inevitably people make these kinds of mistakes.
But they can't help themselves on the Trump maybe going to jail front, on the we're gonna get him this time. This is the thing. Like they're so. It's sad. They're so strung along by Mueller time type thinking. For sure,
and it undermines their credibility with other more substantive arguments. I mean, I'm someone who was largely, I didn't follow the 1-6 commissions and the reports and the hearings as closely as most, I'm not a Democrat, but that a lot of Democrats did, especially Democrats that are in the business, as it were. And the emphasis on the 1-6 insurrection, like the actual day at the Capitol, I think has detracted from, and Jen Briney of Congressional Dish podcast, who reads all the hearing reports and reads all of the congressional filings, did a good deep dive on this. It has obscured the bigger story about the election interference, the efforts at election interference that preceded the events at the Capitol. So, Donald Trump making calls to secretaries of state and trying to get them not to certify the slate of electors and trying to put together fake slates of electors, doing those kinds of actually legal activities. We'll see if he actually gets, if those charges stick. But that is such a bigger story. But anybody trying to tell that story has their credibility meaningfully undermined by making such a big deal of things like returning documents and pretending like an FBI raid, was it warranted? Was it necessary? I'm not sure. There are experts that will speak to that. But all the pomp and circumstance around events like that really takes away from these more important legal claims that are being put together by folks who have much less a sensationalist background.
Well, meanwhile, Morning Joe host Joe Scarborough did a lengthy comedy bit mocking comparisons between Biden's classified documents and the criminal probe into former President Donald Trump over classified documents. Let's watch.
So on these docs, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Because Trump had docs, Biden has Trump. First question. So did Joe Biden's lawyers lie to the FBI and the DOJ about actually having all the documents returned to them? Did he do that?
No, they did not. As soon as they discovered that there were these documents in this think tank associated with Joe Biden, they then notified the federal government.
But the DOJ obviously, just like in the Trump case, so they had to go into long, drawn-out negotiations, right, to try to get these Biden documents back like they did in the Trump case. Long, drawn-out negotiations over a month. They had to do that, right?
Actually, Joe, no, they didn't. The Biden team turned over the documents the very next day after they discovered them.
Okay, but the Biden team, though, before they turned it over, just like the Trump team, because I'm sure it's the same thing. This is the same thing with both of them. I'm sure the Biden team, in between that time when they turned it back, Biden had them go in to the warehouses and remove the rooms, remove documents, right? Get them out of there after they were notified by the DOJ to hide them somewhere?
No, President Biden has said that he first learned that these documents even existed and were in his materials when his lawyers discovered them in November. There was no effort to hide them. They turned them over.
Hold on, though. Okay, so fine. But it's still the same thing because we all know, we've all read the stories when Biden was vice president. He would often tear up.
I think he was doing a bit.
Yes, certainly a bit. Look, I think the
Does our desk look like that? They had stuff all over their table. I feel like I need to be more
just straighten up a little bit,
yeah.
so you don't look that. Yeah. I kind of respect that Mika's fully just bringing shawls onto set to stay warm.
You always complain about being cold.
I'm always cold, and I kind of respect the boldness there. But look, I think one of my favorite takes on all of this, it seems like a bunch of a nonsense story, a lot of it mostly just a nonsense story, but Edward Snowden tweeted that, yes, Trump and Biden and Hillary all mishandled classified documents. You could argue who did it worse, as they were doing in that bit, or you can question if we really need a system that crushes ordinary workers who fall afoul of it while excusing the same crimes if they're done by elites. And I think that's a solid point. Nobody who is a president, vice president, former Secretary of State is really going to go down over any of this. Elites don't go to jail and aren't prosecuted the way that whistleblowers and leakers who are leaking in the interest of the public are so harshly punished. And I think that's the real lesson here.
Well, and also maybe we don't have to have so many classified documents because the default should be that everything is available to the American people. The American people deserve to know what our government is doing and saying and communicating, even about complex and sensitive foreign policy subjects. What they're able to do when it's all hidden from view is usually not to our benefit. I'm sure there are cases and there are certain things that need to be kept secret, yes, but that should be the exception. But it's always the rule with these people increasingly. They're shielded from accountability. And then when we find out, then when it gets leaked, when an Edward Snowden type figure tells us what they're actually doing, what they actually think of us, and what their actual policies are, they're horrifying and no one supports them.
Right. Well, release the JFK files and we'll have more on Rising right after this.